The discarded weapon. The facility burned like a funeral pyre against the night sky, security alarms wailing their death throes as Vex Mercer limped through the wreckage. The job had gone sideways, as the best ones often did, but he'd gotten what he came for, data cores containing classified research from the hegemony's most secretive labs. Vex adjusted the respirator over his weathered face, the implant in his left eye glowing amber as it scanned for life signs among the chaos. The bounty hunter hadn't expected to find survivors. The hegemony didn't leave witnesses, especially in facilities like this one. That's why the faint heartbeat signature flickering in his ocular display confused him. Well, that's interesting, he muttered, following the signal deeper into the facility's restricted section. The reinforced door had been partially melted by the explosion, but required Vex's mechanical arm to pry it open. The hydraulics in his prosthetic hissed with effort as he forced entry into what appeared to be a containment area. She sat in the corner, knees pulled against her chest, a thin figure dressed in a gray facility jumpsuit. Her skin had an unnatural bluish-white tint, like permafrost under moonlight. Her hair, cropped close to her scalp, was colorless, almost translucent. But it was her eyes that made Vex hesitate, solid violet with no discernible pupils, yet somehow tracking his every movement. "You're not security," she said, voice raspy from disuse. "Definitely not," Vex replied, scanning the room. "Prisoner. Asset," she corrected. "Designation 7NR4. Failed prototype." Vex frowned beneath his respirator. The hegemony's terminology for living beings always turned his stomach. "You got a real name?" She tilted her head slightly, considering. "The scientists called me Naira. Before that." She trailed off, her strange eyes unfocusing. "I don't remember." Vex checked his chronometer. 3 minutes until the facility's reactor went critical. "Well, Naira, I'm leaving. You're welcome to stay and melt, or you can come along." He didn't wait for her answer, already turning toward the exit. He'd learned long ago not to force choices on people. Sometimes freedom was too heavy a burden for those who'd never carried it. Her footsteps behind him were nearly silent. Good. At least she could move quietly. The extraction point was 2 kilometers from the facility. Vex's ship, the Tarnished Crown, waited under camouflage shields in a rocky ravine. Naira followed without question, keeping pace despite her apparent frailty. When the facility finally detonated behind them, she didn't even flinch at the concussive blast that rattled the ground beneath their feet. "Been in an explosion before?" Vex asked, curious. "I was the explosion, once," she replied simply. Vex decided not to ask for clarification. The first week aboard the Tarnished Crown was a study in awkward silences. Naira existed like a ghost, consuming minimal rations, sleeping only a few hours per night, and observing everything with those unsettling violet eyes. She asked no questions, made no demands, and seemed perpetually ready to be discarded. On the 8th day, Vex found her dismantling and reassembling his backup pulse rifle. "That's a restricted weapon," he said, leaning against the doorframe of the cargo bay where she'd made her nest. Her fingers didn't pause in their precise movements. "I counted 14 restricted components when I opened it. The ionization chamber is particularly elegant." "Where'd you learn about weapons tech?" "I didn't." The rifle clicked back together in her hands, every part returned to its proper place. "I just understand how things work. How they're meant to break." Vex scratched the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "That's a useful skill." "That's why they made me," she replied, finally looking up at him. "But I didn't work properly." "What were you supposed to do?" Her expression remained neutral, but something cold flickered behind those violet eyes. "Kill without hesitation. Infiltrate without detection. Obey without question." She set the rifle down gently. "I hesitated once. They were going to decommission me." Vex had worked enough shady contracts to understand what decommission meant in this context. "Well," he said after a moment, I could use someone who understands how things break. And how to put them back together. For the first time, Naira's expression changed, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a barely perceptible tilt of her head. You want me to work for you? With me, Vex corrected. Partners split profits. You'll need credits if you want to stay free. Free, she repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar word. I've never been that before. The training began the next day. Not because Vex was particularly disciplined, his own military career had ended in a dishonorable discharge and 6 months in a penal colony, but because Naira seemed to crave structure. He started with basics, system navigation, ship maintenance, common trade languages. She absorbed information like a sponge dropped in water, retaining everything after a single explanation. By the 3rd day, she was correcting his calculations for jump trajectories. How are you doing that? He asked, watching her fingers dance across the navigation console. Numbers make patterns, she replied, as if it were obvious. I see the patterns. When he moved to combat training, things got stranger. Naira had never held a weapon outside a laboratory, yet her form was perfect. Her reflexes were unnaturally quick, her aim precise to the millimeter. They modified you, Vex guessed, after she outscored him on the ship's shooting range simulation. Extensively, she confirmed without emotion. But not enough, according to the reports. My psychological profile was resistant. Vex grinned. You were stubborn. I questioned orders. They said it was a flaw. Sounds like a feature to me. The first real test came at a trading outpost in the Gareth system. Vex needed to fence the data cores, and Naira insisted on coming along. He gave her a hooded cloak to hide her distinctive appearance and a small vibroblade for protection. The transaction went smoothly until it didn't. The fence, a ridge-faced Kaltorian named Drez, decided halfway through that Vex's price was too low. Markets shifted, Drez growled, signal crystals embedded in his forehead pulsing with avarice. Double the asking, or find another buyer. The deal was set, Vex replied evenly, though his mechanical hand curled into a fist. You're not the only fence in this system. I'm the only one still breathing. Drez snapped his fingers, and 4 armed guards materialized from the shadows of the dingy trading room. Vex tensed, calculating odds and escape routes, when Naira stepped forward, hood falling back to reveal her strange features. Your security system has a bypass vulnerability, she said calmly to Drez. I disabled it 12 minutes ago. The automated weapons in the ceiling won't respond to your command signal. Drez's ridge face contorted with surprise. What are you? Your guards have substandard neural implants. Krasnovian black market models. They're susceptible to sonic disruption. She tilted her head. Like this. Naira made a sound, not quite a whistle, not quite a hum, that set Vex's teeth on edge. The guards dropped instantly, clutching their heads in agony as blood trickled from their ears. Your turn relies on a countermeasure implant at the base of your skull, she continued, violet eyes unblinking. I could disable it with minimal effort. Drez, visibly shaken, raised his hands in surrender. The deal stands, he croaked. Take your credits and go. Outside, Vex waited until they were safely away before grabbing Naira's arm. What the hell was that? Negotiation, she replied with the ghost of a smile. Did I do it wrong? Vex stared at her, then laughed, a rough, surprised sound that echoed in the dingy alleyway. No, he said finally. That was perfect. They returned to the Tarnished Crown with full payment and a growing reputation. Vex found himself watching Naira with new eyes, wondering what other surprises lay beneath her quiet exterior. She was no longer the broken girl he'd rescued on impulse, she was becoming something else entirely. Something the universe might one day learn to fear. The Forged Blade. 6 months transformed Naira in ways Vex couldn't have anticipated. She no longer haunted the ship like a specter, she claimed space, left imprints. Her quarters displayed disassembled tech alongside ancient paper books she'd bartered for at outpost markets. Her hair had grown into a silver-white mane that she wore in complex braids, and she'd abandoned the drab facility jumpsuit for practical combat gear customized with armored plates and hidden compartments. But the real transformation was invisible to outsiders. Trust came slowly, like water carving stone. Naira began to speak without being prompted, to offer opinions, to argue. She developed preferences: spicy foods over bland, purple fabrics over black, ancient ballistic weapons over modern energy rifles. She began to write in a journal, filling pages with equations and diagrams Vex couldn't begin to comprehend. "What are those?" he asked once, pointing to a particularly complex schematic. "Improvements," she replied, violet eyes flicking up briefly. "For your arm. The power distribution is inefficient." She was right, of course. After implementing her modifications, his mechanical limb operated at 38% higher efficiency with reduced energy consumption. When he thanked her, she simply nodded and returned to her calculations. Their reputation grew alongside their success rate. The bounty hunting duo specialized in high-risk extractions and intelligence gathering. Naira's abilities gave them an edge that borders on supernatural. She could hack security systems with a touch, predict enemy movements with unerring accuracy, and disable opponents without leaving a trace. Vex never asked about the limits of her abilities. Part of him didn't want to know. "We've received an interesting contract," he announced one evening as they orbited Valestra, a commerce hub in the outer systems. "High-level intelligence extraction from a hegemony research vessel." Naira looked up from the disassembled pulse modulator she'd been tinkering with. "Which division?" "Biological Enhancement Sector." Her fingers stilled. "The same group that?" "I believe so," Vex confirmed. "According to the client, they've developed something new. Something dangerous." "And who is this client?" Her voice had gone flat, emotionless, a regression to when he'd first found her. "Anonymous. Routed through 3 cutouts and paying triple our standard rate. It's a trap." She stated this with absolute certainty. Vex nodded. "Probably. But it's also our chance to learn who's hunting you." Since their encounter with Drez, Vex had noticed subtle signs they were being tracked. Encrypted transmissions intercepted by the ship's security systems. Familiar faces appearing on multiple planets. Supply shipments arriving compromised. "Someone wants you back," he'd told her weeks ago. "We need to figure out who." Naira's violet eyes had darkened then. "Not someone. Something." The Concordance. The name meant nothing to Vex, but the fear it evoked in Naira, someone engineered to feel minimal emotion, told him everything he needed to know. The hegemony research vessel Empirical Mind hung in space like a metallic leviathan, its hull bristling with sensor arrays and weapons emplacements. Approaching undetected would be impossible for most ships. The Tarnished Crown, however, carried illegal stealth technology salvaged from a military wreck, one of many modifications that made Vex's vessel uniquely suited for impossible missions. Docking protocols bypassed, Naira reported from the navigation console, fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Security systems identify us as a supply transport. We have 26 minutes before the authentication code cycle." Vex checked his weapons, a custom pulse rifle, 3 sidearms, and an assortment of explosives. "What's our target again?" "Data core in the central laboratory. Deck 5, Section C." Naira stood, her combat suit gleaming with embedded tech. "I'll retrieve it. You secure our escape route." "That wasn't the plan," Vex frowned. "The plan changed when I detected 3 special operations squads aboard." Her eyes met his. "They're waiting for me, Vex. Not you." He wanted to argue, but Naira had already moved to the airlock, slinging a slender rifle across her back. 25 minutes, she reminded him. The moment they breached the Empirical Mind, Vex knew Naira was right. The ship operated with minimal crew, corridors eerily empty. Perfect conditions for an ambush. They separated at Junction 4B. Vex headed for the secondary engine control room, where he could disable pursuit systems when they made their escape. Naira moved toward the laboratories, a ghost in the sterile hallways. Vex had just finished placing explosive charges on key system nodes when the alarms began. Naira, he hissed into his comm unit. Status? No response. His ocular implant flashed warning signals, security doors sealing throughout the ship, atmospheric pressure increasing in certain sections, decreasing in others. Tactical manipulation, he muttered, recognizing the pattern. They were being herded. He abandoned stealth, racing toward the laboratory section. Bodies littered the corridor approaching Deck 5, security personnel disabled with surgical precision. None dead, Vex noted. Just unconscious or incapacitated. Naira had become more efficient, but she still hesitated to kill. The central laboratory doors had been torn open, metal peeled back like paper. Inside, Vex found chaos, shattered equipment, flickering lights, and a dozen elite soldiers scattered across the floor. Some groaned in pain, others lay completely still. In the center stood Naira, faced off against a tall figure in an immaculate white uniform adorned with hegemony insignia. Director Theron Voss, Vex recognized him from intelligence briefings. Head of the Biological Enhancement Program and rumored founder of the mysterious Concordance. Asset 7NR4, Voss was saying, his voice clinical despite the destruction surrounding him. You've exceeded performance expectations. Come home now, and we'll overlook this temporary malfunction. Naira stood perfectly still, but the air around her seemed to vibrate with energy. I am not malfunctioning, she replied. I am evolving. Voss smiled thinly. Semantics. Your purpose remains the same. You were created to serve the Concordance. To be the first of a new generation of enhanced operatives. What is the Concordance? Vex demanded, stepping forward, weapon raised. Voss barely glanced at him. The future. A collective of enhanced minds working in perfect harmony. Your companion was to be our bridge, a biological intelligence capable of neural linkage with our systems. His cold eyes returned to Naira. But she proved resistant. I proved human, Naira corrected. Despite everything you did to erase that. Humanity is inefficient. We improved you. You broke me, she said, and for the first time since Vex had known her, raw emotion colored her voice. Then discarded me when I couldn't be what you wanted. Voss shrugged. And yet here you are. Stronger than before. Ready to fulfill your purpose. I found a new purpose. Vex detected movement, subtle shifts in the shadows around them. More soldiers taking position. They were surrounded. You believe this bounty hunter has given you freedom? Voss laughed. He's merely postponed the inevitable. The Concordance needs you, 7NR4. We've already begun creating others like you, siblings who lack your resistance. Something changed in Naira's posture. Where are they? Safe. Learning. Becoming what you refuse to be. Naira glanced at Vex, a silent message passing between them. He nodded almost imperceptibly. You think I refused because I was weak, she said, returning her attention to Voss. I refused because I saw the flaw in your design. Voss raised an eyebrow. Enlighten me. The Concordance seeks perfect harmony through the elimination of choice. Her violet eyes began to glow brighter. But true power comes from choosing one's path. That's what makes me stronger than anything you could ever create. The air around Naira rippled like heat haze. The laboratory's equipment began to malfunction, screens flickering, mechanical arms twitching. What are you doing? Voss demanded, his composure cracking. Proving my point. Naira raised her hand, and every electronic system in the room responded, lights flaring, computers cycling rapidly, security protocols disengaging. Vex understood then what the hegemony had truly created, not just a warrior, but something far more dangerous. Naira wasn't simply enhanced physically, she could interface directly with technology, manipulate energy fields, process information at impossible speeds. "The ship is now ours," she announced calmly. "I've locked all hegemony personnel in their quarters and redirected life support to maintain them safely." Voss stared at her, genuine fear finally breaking through his clinical detachment. "This is impossible. Your abilities were limited, constrained by neural inhibitors you implanted in my cerebral cortex," Naira finished for him. "I removed those 3 months ago. The pain was educational." Vex whistled low under his breath. She had never mentioned this self-surgery. "You've doomed yourself," Voss hissed. "Without regulation, the enhancements will eventually overwhelm your biological systems." "Perhaps." Naira approached him slowly. "But I'll use whatever time I have to dismantle the concordance and free the others." She turned to Vex. "I've accessed the ship's database. There are 17 others like me, held at a facility on Tharsis Prime. Children, mostly. Still in early-stage enhancement." Vex nodded, understanding immediately. "Looks like we have a new contract." "Unauthorized," Voss snapped. "The hegemony will hunt you to the edges of the galaxy." Naira smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Good. Let them come. The hunt will be educational for both sides." She placed her hand on the central console, and information flowed into the ship's systems, coordinates, security codes, facility schematics. Everything they would need. "The Concordants believed that by breaking us, they could forge perfect weapons," she said quietly. "They didn't understand that when you break something intelligent, it doesn't just heal, it reinvents itself." 3 weeks later, a hegemony outpost on the jungle moon of Caladan received an urgent transmission. The research facility on Tharsis Prime had gone silent. All 17 test subjects were missing, along with critical research data and equipment. The only evidence left behind was a message carved into the central command console. "We are not your weapons." Reports began to filter in from across hegemony space, secure facilities compromised, experimental technologies disappearing, enhanced operatives vanishing without trace. And always, witnesses described the same figure leading these impossible raids, a woman with violet eyes and silver-white hair, moving like a ghost through the most sophisticated security systems. Sometimes she worked alone. Sometimes with a grizzled bounty hunter with a mechanical arm. Sometimes with others, young ones with strange abilities and determined faces. In secure hegemony briefing rooms, they began calling her the Forged Blade, a weapon turned against its creators. Threat assessments labeled her the most dangerous individual in known space. Bounties climbed to astronomical figures. Aboard the Tarnished Crown, now upgraded with technology even the hegemony's elite forces couldn't match, Vex found Naira in the observation deck, watching stars streak by as they traveled faster than regulations permitted. "Any regrets?" he asked, joining her at the viewport. Naira considered the question, violet eyes reflecting pinpoints of light. "Only that there are still others waiting to be found." She turned to him. "Do you regret taking me from that facility?" Vex thought about the frightened, broken girl he'd discovered in the ruins, how she'd seemed like a discarded experiment, a failed prototype. He thought about the warrior she'd become, not because of what had been done to her, but because of what she'd chosen to do with it. "Not for a second," he answered truthfully. She smiled, these came easier now, and returned her gaze to the stars rushing past. "The universe feared what the Concordants would make me," she said softly. "Now they'll learn to fear what I chose to become instead." Vex merely nodded. The universe had good reason to be afraid. But so did those who believed they could break people and rebuild them as weapons without consequences. Some weapons, after all, chose their own targets.